She stepped onto the stage, her face a mixture of confidence and disbelief. The audience was still buzzing from the recent accusation made against her. The kind of claim that could ruin a career overnight. But instead of backing down, Karoline Leavitt did the unthinkable. She fired back. Her words sharp and calculated. What happened next left everyone stunned, including the host, Stephen Colbert. Was this just a simple misunderstanding? Or was something far deeper at play? Before we begin the story, don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel to help us reach 1,000 subscribers soon. Your support is the motivation that drives us to create even more engaging content. Thank you. It was a quiet afternoon when Marissa found herself standing at the counter of a bustling coffee shop. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. She had just gotten off a long shift at a local diner. Her tired legs aching as she waited in line. She wasn't dressed in the most fashionable clothes. Just a simple blouse and faded jeans. But that was the least of her worries. It was the way people looked at her, the subtle glances, the quick judgments. Being a woman of color, she had always felt the weight of society's eyes on her. But today, the feeling was heavier than ever. When she finally reached the counter, the middle-aged man behind the register looked at her with a raised eyebrow. His name tag read, Mike. But he didn't seem to care about her name. His eyes scanned her outfit, then her face, as if making a snap decision. What can I get you? Mike asked, his voice a little colder than usual. Marissa smiled, trying to hide the unease building in her chest. Just a small latte, please. Mike didn't respond with his usual politeness. Instead, he motioned for her to step aside. We're out of small cups, he said curtly. You'll have to order a medium. Confused, Marissa raised an eyebrow. But I saw small cups in the back. Are you sure? Mike's expression shifted to one of irritation. I said we don't have any. Take it or leave it. A few people behind her in line began to murmur. And she felt their eyes on her, silently judging. She could feel the warmth of the coffee shop's atmosphere suddenly turn cold. But she didn't want to make a scene. Marissa took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising anger in her chest. Okay, I'll take the medium, she said quietly. But as she paid, the barista next to Mike, an older woman who had been standing idly, suddenly spoke up. Is that it? You're just going to let him talk to you like that? She asked, her voice laced with pity. Marissa froze, taken aback by the question. Before she could respond, Mike shot the woman a sharp glare, and she immediately looked down, avoiding Marissa's gaze. Marissa's heart sank. She knew this wasn't just about the coffee. It was about something deeper, something that had been happening for far too long. As she walked away from the counter, she noticed how everyone in the cafe seemed to have turned their attention elsewhere, pretending not to see the injustice that had just unfolded before them. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. But something in her stirred. This wasn't just a random act of rudeness. It was part of a much bigger pattern, a system that she had been a part of. Without realizing it, something in her felt like it was time to fight back. The next day, Marissa decided to speak up. She'd been thinking about the incident all night, turning it over in her mind. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. How many times had she been ignored, dismissed, or treated unfairly just because of the way she looked? How many times had she kept quiet, not wanting to rock the boat? But this time, something was different. She wasn't going to let it slide. She made her way back to the coffee shop, hoping to speak with the manager. Mike wasn't there today, but she knew she had to say something. She needed to make it clear that what had happened was wrong. She couldn't let that moment pass without standing up for herself. When she walked in, the place was quieter than usual. The morning rush was over, and only a few customers sat sipping their drinks. She approached the counter, where a young woman greeted her with a polite smile. Hi, how can I help you today? The woman asked. I need to speak with the manager, Marissa said, her voice firm but calm. The woman looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Sure, one moment. A few minutes later, a man in his early 40s walked up to the counter. His name tag read, Tom. How can I help you? He asked, his tone professional, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was already on edge. I was here yesterday, and I had a pretty bad experience, Marissa began, keeping her voice steady. "The guy at the counter, Mike, he refused to serve me properly. And I felt completely humiliated." Tom's face didn't change, but his eyes flickered to the side for a split second. "I'm sorry to hear that. Mike is our senior barista, and he's usually very good with customers. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Marissa repeated, feeling the heat of frustration build. "No, it wasn't a misunderstanding. He treated me like I wasn't even worth his time. And no one in here said anything. Everyone just watched." Tom shifted uncomfortably, and for the first time, Marissa saw the hint of unease in his eyes. "I understand you're upset, but Mike's been with us a long time. I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it." Marissa felt a surge of anger. "It's not just about him. It's about the fact that this happens all the time. You don't think it's a problem. But it is. You need to take responsibility for how your employees treat people." Tom paused, then sighed. "I'm sorry you feel that way. But you need to leave now. You're making a scene." Her heart dropped. There it was again, the same dismissal. The same rejection. No apology. No responsibility. Just an order to leave. He didn't even care to hear her out. Before she could say anything else, Tom turned away and signaled to the young woman who had greeted her. "Please, escort her out." Marissa's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. But she didn't let them see her break. She turned on her heel, walking out of the coffee shop with her head held high, though the sting of humiliation burned her insides. As she walked to her car, she glanced back at the cafe. The world inside went on as if nothing had happened. No one cared, but she was done being quiet. Marissa had barely slept the night before, her mind a whirlwind of frustration and anger. What had happened at the coffee shop was just the beginning. She knew it, deep down. This wasn't just about a bad experience at a cafe. It was part of a pattern, a bigger system that kept telling her she wasn't enough, that her voice didn't matter. And now, after trying to bring attention to it, she was starting to feel the weight of that system pressing down on her more than ever. She walked into the small office the next morning, still holding on to the hope that someone, anyone, would listen. But the atmosphere in the room felt off, like the walls themselves were closing in. Her boss, Peter, was sitting behind his desk, flipping through a stack of papers, completely unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. She stood there for a moment, just watching him, before speaking up. "Peter, I need to talk," Marissa said, her voice steady, though she could feel the nerves creeping up her spine. He looked up, his tired eyes flickering with surprise. "About what?" Marissa took a deep breath. "About what happened yesterday, with Mike at the coffee shop." Peter frowned, setting the papers down slowly. "What about it?" She hesitated, her hands trembling as she tried to gather the courage to explain. "I was treated unfairly, Peter. I tried to speak up. But when I did, I was ignored. And then Mike, he..." "Marissa, I told you, it's just a misunderstanding," Peter interrupted, leaning back in his chair, the same patronizing tone he always used when she spoke up. "Mike's been with us for years. He's a good guy. I'm sure he didn't mean any harm." The words hit her like a slap. She had expected resistance, but hearing it from him, someone she thought she could trust, made the sting even worse. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. "This isn't just about Mike. It's bigger than that. It's about the way things work around here. The way people like me are dismissed, treated like we don't matter," she said, her voice wavering slightly. Peter's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "I don't think you're in a position to be making accusations like that. We're all just trying to get through our work here. You need to focus on your tasks, not on this drama." Her chest tightened at his words. She knew what he was implying, that she should just sit quietly, let things slide, and go back to doing her job without rocking the boat. But she couldn't, not anymore. "Drama?" she echoed, her voice rising. "Is that what you think this is? A little drama? Do you not see what's going on here? Do you not see that people like me, who are just trying to survive, are being ignored and pushed aside?" Peter stood up then, his hands pressed against his desk, his face flushed. "Enough, Marissa. I don't have time for this. You're making a big deal out of nothing. This isn't the place for your personal issues." Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to let out all the anger and frustration that had been building up for so long. But she knew it would do no good. Peter wasn't listening. He wasn't even trying to understand. She turned to leave, but as she reached the door, she heard him call out, "Maybe you should take the rest of the day off. Clear your head." Marissa didn't look back. She didn't need to hear anything else. She walked out of the office, her feet heavy, as though the weight of his words was pushing her down. The door closed behind her with a soft click. But it might as well have been a slam. It wasn't just about the coffee shop anymore. It was about every time she had been told to stay quiet, to accept what was happening around her. But today was different. Today, she wouldn't back down. No one could silence her anymore. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every person who had ever been told their voice didn't matter. The moment she stepped outside, the sun hit her face. But it didn't warm her. She stood there for a moment, staring at the busy street in front of her, the hum of the city around her. The world seemed to keep spinning, unaffected, as if nothing had changed. But something inside her had shifted. She could feel it. As she walked down the sidewalk, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from a coworker, Linda, who had witnessed the scene in the coffee shop the day before. "Marissa," the text read, "I heard what happened. I've been where you are. If you want to talk, I'm here." For the first time in what felt like forever, Marissa felt a small flicker of hope. Someone saw her. Someone understood. She tucked the phone back in her pocket and took a deep breath. She wasn't done yet. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The weight of what happened the day before hung heavily over Marissa as she sat in her small apartment, nursing a cup of coffee. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. What was supposed to be a simple act of standing up for herself had turned into something much bigger. Something much darker. The coffee shop incident wasn't an isolated case. It was just the tip of the iceberg. She had been blind to it before. But now the reality was clear. This wasn't just about Mike or a rude manager. It was about a system that allowed people like her to be dismissed, to be treated as less than. A system that had turned a blind eye for far too long. Marissa had always prided herself on being strong, on not letting the little things get to her. But this was different. This wasn't a small injustice. This was the kind of thing that eroded a person's sense of self-worth. This was the kind of thing that could break someone. And she wasn't going to let it break her. She couldn't. She stood up from the table and grabbed her phone, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. She scrolled through her contacts until she found Linda's name. Linda had been the only person to reach out after the coffee shop incident. The only one who seemed to understand. Maybe, just maybe, she would have some answers. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she typed out a message. "I need to talk. I think it's bigger than just the coffee shop. I think there's a system here that's been working against people like me for a long time." She hit send and waited. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply. "I've been where you are. Let's meet." Marissa felt a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. Someone saw it. Someone understood. She wasn't alone in this fight. They met in a quiet diner the next day. As soon as Linda walked in, Marissa recognized the look in her eyes. It was a mixture of resolve and exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that came from fighting battles that no one else could see. "I've been waiting for this," Linda said, sitting down across from Marissa. "I know exactly what you're talking about. This isn't just a coffee shop incident, it's a pattern. It's everywhere. But the thing is, no one wants to see it." Marissa nodded, her stomach twisting. "I've been so blind. I thought it was just me. That I was the one who wasn't good enough. But it's bigger than that, right?" Linda took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room before she spoke. "It's the system. It's how things have always been. They push us down, make us feel small, so we won't fight back. But I'm done letting them win. And I think you're ready to stop letting them win too." Marissa sat back, processing Linda's words. She had always known there was something wrong, something off about the way things worked. But hearing it out loud made it real. This wasn't just a fight for herself anymore. It was a fight for everyone who had been silenced, ignored, or pushed aside. "How do we fight back?" Marissa asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Linda smiled, a small, knowing smile. "We start by speaking up. We expose the truth, piece by piece. It won't be easy, but we have to. If we don't, who will?" Marissa's heart raced. The idea of standing up, really standing up, scared her. But as she looked into Linda's eyes, she knew there was no turning back. We start with the people who've been hurt before. Linda continued. We find the evidence, the documents, the recordings, anything we can use. But we have to be careful. They're watching us. They'll try to shut us down. But we can't let them. Marissa nodded, her mind already turning with plans and strategies. She had no idea how she was going to do this. But she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. She had to fight, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel less than they were. The conversation continued, but as Marissa listened to Linda's plan, a sinking feeling began to grow in her chest. The more Linda spoke, the more Marissa realized how much power the system held. It wasn't just a matter of standing up in a coffee shop or confronting a rude manager. It was much more insidious. A deep-rooted injustice that would take everything Marissa had to confront. As they parted ways that afternoon, Linda gave her one last piece of advice. You're not alone, Marissa, but you have to be ready. This won't be easy, but if you're strong enough, you'll make a difference. Marissa didn't know if she was strong enough, but what she did know was that she couldn't turn back now. She had started down this path, and there was no going back. When she walked home that evening, the city lights felt different, colder somehow. The weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her. But it also gave her a sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in a long time. As she stared at the streetlights flickering in the distance, she couldn't help but wonder how many other people had faced the same injustice. The same silencing. How many others had tried to speak up and been pushed down? Just like her? Tonight, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for them too. Marissa sat in her apartment that evening, the weight of everything pressing down on her. The reality she had been slowly uncovering was becoming clearer with each passing day. And the more she saw, the harder it was to ignore. The injustice she had been forced to endure was not a random occurrence, it was part of something far bigger. The coffee shop incident had been just the beginning, a minor piece of a much larger puzzle, one that involved a system that kept people like her in the shadows. She wasn't just fighting one person, one rude manager. She was fighting an entire network of power. A system designed to silence those who were weak, those who didn't have a voice. But even knowing that, the loneliness of the fight was starting to get to her. The world around her seemed indifferent to the injustice. It was a system that had always worked this way. And no one, not even the people who could help her, wanted to disrupt it. She could feel the pressure of it all, her job, her place in society. The people around her who were either too scared or too indifferent to make a stand. How many others had been in her position? How many had tried and failed? The weight of those thoughts threatened to crush her. But she couldn't afford to give in to them. The fight for truth was already bigger than just her. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Linda. She quickly opened the message. I found something. You need to see this. Marissa's pulse quickened. Linda had been a valuable ally. A person who had seen through the same cracks Marissa had. She didn't waste time with small talk. If Linda had found something, it meant it was important. Without a second thought, Marissa grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. Linda was waiting for her at a small diner downtown. A quiet place where they could talk without drawing too much attention. When Marissa walked in, Linda was already sitting at a booth, her face strained, a mixture of exhaustion and urgency in her eyes. I've been looking into everything. Linda began as soon as Marissa sat down. And I think I've found something that proves this is much bigger than we thought. Marissa leaned in, feeling her heart race. What did you find? Linda pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table. It's a copy of some internal documents, emails between managers, memos from higher ups. It's all there. Mike's not just one bad apple. He's part of something much more insidious. Marissa stared at the envelope, her mind racing. How did you get this? Linda's eyes darted around the room before she spoke quietly. It's not just Mike. There's a network of people who have been manipulating things behind the scenes. And it goes all the way up. I'm not the only one who's noticed it. But no one dares to speak up. They've all been silenced one way or another. Marissa felt a chill run through her. But this is proof. We can expose them. Linda shook her head. It's not enough. Not yet. These documents, these emails, they don't directly point to anything criminal. They just show the system is rigged. The higher-ups will find a way to cover it up. Marissa felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't enough. Not yet. What now? She asked. Her voice barely a whisper. We can't stop. We keep looking. We dig deeper. Find more pieces. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Marissa knew that Linda was right. The documents were a start. But they were far from a solution. They didn't have the smoking gun they needed to bring down the system. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not now. She stared at the envelope in front of her, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. She wasn't alone in this fight. I'm in, Marissa said, looking Linda straight in the eye. I won't stop. Linda gave a small nod. But Marissa could see the doubt in her eyes. They both knew the risks. They both knew what could happen if they were caught. As they parted ways, the evening air felt colder than it had before. The city around her seemed unchanged, indifferent to the battles being fought on its streets. But Marissa was different now. She wasn't walking alone anymore. And no matter how big the system was, she was going to take it down, piece by piece. On her way home, Marissa passed the same coffee shop where everything had started. She looked at the door, the windows, the familiar faces inside. For a moment, she wondered how many others had suffered in silence. Just like her. How many had seen the cracks in the system but didn't have the courage to speak up? Tonight, she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for them too. Marissa sat at her kitchen table, staring at the document in front of her. It wasn't just a simple piece of paper, it was the key to everything. The emails, the memos, the records that had been passed to her by Linda. It was all there. A smoking gun that could expose the network of power players who had been manipulating things for years. But there was one problem. Revealing it could cost everything. It could destroy Linda's career, her own job, and perhaps even more. Linda had been clear. This could change everything. But it will also make us targets. They'll come after us. Hard. The weight of those words pressed heavily on Marissa's chest. For the first time, she understood the true stakes of this fight. This wasn't just about her personal vendetta or righting a wrong. It was about taking down a system. One that had crushed so many under its heel. And to do that, she had to make a choice. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a new ally. Someone she had only recently connected with. Someone who had inside knowledge of the corruption she was fighting. His name was Daniel, a former employee who had worked closely with the people at the heart of it all. Marissa had reached out to him when she learned about his past involvement in the organization, hoping he could shed some light on how deep the corruption ran. I've got something. You need to see this. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. But as she read the message again, a sinking feeling settled in her stomach. What if Daniel was in too deep? What if helping her would put him in harm's way? Marissa sat for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Should she meet him? Should she trust him with this kind of responsibility? Or should she walk away and protect herself from the storm she had stirred up? Her phone buzzed again, breaking her thoughts. It was Linda. I'm hearing whispers. They know someone's been talking. I'm scared. Marissa, if we go through with this, we could lose everything. Marissa let out a slow breath. She could feel the fear in Linda's words. The same fear that had been building inside her since the first day she had set foot in that coffee shop. She had started this journey alone. But now, she was dragging people with her. People who had no idea how dangerous it could get. The phone buzzed once more. This time, it was Daniel calling. She hesitated for a moment before picking up. Marissa? His voice was low, tense. We need to meet. There's something big I have to show you. Her pulse quickened. This was it, the turning point. She had been on the edge for so long. But now, the choice was clear. I'm on my way, Marissa said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. The meeting was set at an old diner on the edge of town. A place where secrets could be shared without fear of being overheard. As she drove there, Marissa's thoughts raced. She knew what she had to do. She knew she had to take the risk. To stand up not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced by this system. But it was terrifying. Every step she took felt like a leap into the unknown. When she arrived at the diner, Daniel was already sitting in a corner booth, his eyes scanning the room nervously. As soon as he saw her, He stood up and waved her over. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Marissa slid into the booth across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Here," Daniel said, sliding a folder across the table. "This is everything I have. It's bigger than you think. They've been manipulating things for years." Marissa opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents. It was worse than she could have imagined. The corruption ran deep, and the people at the top were pulling strings that went far beyond anything she had expected. It wasn't just about a few bad apples, this was a network. A system designed to keep the powerful in control and the rest of the world down. She looked up at Daniel. "How did you get this?" "I worked with them," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But when I realized what was going on, I had to leave. I couldn't be a part of it anymore." Marissa nodded, understanding the weight of his words. He had risked everything to get her this information. But as she looked at the documents in front of her, the reality of what they were about to do hit her. They couldn't just expose this. They couldn't just share it and hope for the best. They had to fight, and fighting meant going up against people who would stop at nothing to protect their own power. "I can't do this alone," Marissa said quietly. "I need your help. We have to take this down. Together." Daniel hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "But it's too dangerous, Marissa. If we go public, they'll come after us. There's no turning back after that." She met his gaze, her voice firm. "We've already started. We can't stop now." As they talked, Marissa could feel the tension building. They were standing on the edge of something much bigger than either of them. But as she looked down at the evidence, at the proof of the corruption, she knew there was no other choice. If they didn't act, if they didn't expose this, the system would keep hurting people just like her. The diner door swung open, and Marissa froze. A man stepped inside, someone she didn't recognize, but who instantly made her feel uneasy. His gaze swept over the room, and for a moment, Marissa thought he was looking right at her. Daniel noticed too, his face going pale. "They know," he whispered. "Someone must have tipped them off." Marissa's heart skipped a beat. It had only just begun, but it was already too late to turn back. Marissa stood in front of her bathroom mirror, her reflection barely recognizable. The weight of everything that had happened, the attacks from all sides, the loss of friends and colleagues, was starting to sink in. It was like the world around her had shifted, leaving her in the dark, struggling to find her footing. She had been through tough times before, but nothing had prepared her for the relentless wave that was now crashing over her. The media, once a source of potential support, had turned against her. Headlines screamed lies, accusations of being a liar, and vengeful, echoed from every corner. Each day seemed to bring a new smear campaign, more relentless than the last. Her every move was being scrutinized, twisted, and reshared until she no longer recognized herself in the stories. The worst part? She was losing allies, people she thought she could trust, turning their backs one by one, some out of fear, others out of self-preservation. The system she had begun to challenge was so much bigger than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about Mike anymore, it was about a network of people who had everything to lose and were willing to do anything to protect themselves. "Marissa, you need to step back," her friend Caitlin had said earlier that day, eyes wide with concern. "You're digging yourself into a hole. They're going to destroy you if you keep this up." But Marissa couldn't stop, not now, not after everything that had happened. She had to keep fighting, even if it meant losing everything. Sitting alone at her kitchen table, she turned over the latest article that had been written about her. Another disgruntled worker attempting to destroy a good man's reputation. It read, "A woman with an axe to grind, using her personal failures to create a scandal." Her hands trembled as she clenched the paper in her fists. The words burned, not because they were untrue, but because they were exactly what her enemies wanted people to believe. They wanted to paint her as crazy, a bitter woman who was making up stories. The truth didn't matter. They had the power to control the narrative. Outside her window, the city seemed indifferent. The streets below were busy, people going about their lives without a care for the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. But inside her apartment, the silence was deafening. It felt like she was the only one who knew the truth. And the more she fought, the more isolated she became. Then her phone buzzed. It was Linda. "They're making their move," The message read, "The press is turning. They're planning something big, something that will bury us." Marissa stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. This was it, the final push, the moment when her enemies would use everything at their disposal to destroy her completely. She had expected it, but knowing it was coming didn't make it easier to face. She replied quickly, "What do we do?" Linda's response came swiftly. "I've been digging. There's something I found. Something small. It might be our way out." Marissa's heart skipped a beat. She knew Linda was meticulous, always thinking ahead. She trusted her. But could this be the breakthrough they needed? "Meet me at the diner tonight. I'll explain everything." Linda's message continued. Marissa's mind raced as she grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. The cold air hit her face as soon as she stepped outside, the chill seeping into her bones. She had no idea what Linda had found, but it was their last chance. It had to be. The diner was quiet when she arrived, just like the first time she had met Linda. The same corner booth, the same soft hum of the lights above them. But tonight, the atmosphere felt different, charged with tension. Linda was already there, her face set in determination. "Sit down," Linda said quietly as Marissa approached. Her eyes darted around before meeting Marissa's. "This might be the key to everything. But we have to move fast." Marissa slid into the booth, her gaze fixed on the envelope Linda placed in front of her. It wasn't much, just a few sheets of paper. But the look in Linda's eyes told her everything. "What is it?" Marissa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda opened the envelope slowly, as if the documents inside might combust if handled too quickly. "It's a recording, a conversation between some of the people at the top. They're planning their next move, against us." Marissa's breath caught in her throat. "What does it say?" "It confirms everything we thought. They're not just covering up one mistake, they're covering up the whole system. And the worst part? It's all planned. They're setting us up to fail, making sure we never get to the truth." Marissa's hands shook as she took the papers from Linda, her eyes scanning the words. It wasn't enough yet. It wasn't enough to bring them down. But it was something. "We have to get this out," Marissa said, the weight of the decision settling over her. "We can't wait anymore." Linda's expression darkened. "If we expose this now, it'll destroy us. We won't just lose everything, we'll become targets. There's no going back after this." Marissa looked out the diner window, the city lights flickering in the distance. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her chest. She had been fighting for so long, had given up so much. And now, with a single choice, she was either going to win or lose everything. "Let's do it," Marissa said, her voice steady. "We don't have a choice." Linda nodded, her face hardening with resolve. "Then we move quickly. I'll start making calls. You get the story out. It's now or never." As they left the diner, Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The city had never felt so cold. But for the first time in a long while, she felt alive. This was it. The storm was coming, and she was ready to face it head on. Marissa sat at her desk, staring at the screen in front of her. The evidence Linda had given her, a simple video recording, seemed almost too good to be true. The clarity of the footage, the damning words spoken, the smugness of the people involved, it was all there. It was the smoking gun she had been desperately searching for. Her fingers trembled as she clicked play again. The conversation was like a slow-motion train wreck, powerful figures discussing their plans, their manipulation of the system, their careless disregard for the consequences. It was the truth laid bare, the evidence that could shatter the facade of control they had built. She could feel her heart pounding as she watched it. This was it, the key to everything. But she couldn't do this alone. Her mind raced with possibilities. Should she release this to the public? Should she hold a press conference or go straight to the authorities? She knew this was bigger than her, bigger than Mike, and bigger than any one person. But the price of exposing the truth could be more than she was willing to pay. It could destroy everything. As she sat back in her chair, staring at the video, her phone buzzed. A message from Linda. "We're going public with this. I'm setting up the press conference. Do you want to be there?" Marissa didn't hesitate. She texted back, "Yes, let's do it." There was no turning back now. The plan was set. The truth would come to light, no matter the cost. The day of the event, Marissa stood backstage, the hum of the crowd just beyond the doors. Her heart raced in her chest. Her hands were clammy, and her throat felt dry. The weight of everything, her choices, her sacrifices, the fear of what might happen next, it was all crashing down on her. She had spent months preparing for this moment, but nothing could prepare her for the flood of emotions she felt now. Linda stood beside her, giving her an encouraging smile. "You've got this. The truth is on your side." Marissa nodded, though doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She had never imagined her life would come to this. It had all started so small, with a single act of defiance, and now it had turned into a battle for her very survival. As they walked to the stage, Marissa could hear the murmur of the crowd grow louder. The buzz of anticipation. The media were there in full force. Cameras pointed at her, ready to capture every moment. The lights above her were blinding, but she didn't let them intimidate her. She had a job to do. She stepped up to the podium, the sound of her heels clicking on the stage echoing in the microphone. The crowd went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, though inside, she felt anything but calm. "What you're about to hear will change everything." She pressed play on the remote, and the video started. As the faces of the powerful figures flashed on the screen, the room seemed to hold its breath. The words they had spoken, the plans they had made, echoed through the speakers. Marissa watched as the audience's expression shifted from curiosity to shock. The room was tense, everyone waiting for the fallout. She could see some people exchanging glances, others whispering under their breath. But as the video continued, something remarkable happened. People started to stand up, daring to speak out. The tide was turning. Marissa paused the video, her voice cutting through the growing murmur. "This is the truth. This is what they tried to hide. But no more. This is not just my fight. It's all of ours." There was a beat of silence. Then, someone in the crowd stood up, clapping. Slowly, others joined in. The applause grew louder, more fervent. For the first time, Marissa felt like she wasn't fighting alone. But not everyone was on her side. In the back of the room, Mike stood, arms crossed, eyes dark. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. He had been a part of this system, and now he had to face the consequences of his actions. Marissa knew he would try to fight back. She knew he would try to discredit her, to claim that she had misunderstood, that she was overreacting. But that didn't matter anymore. The evidence was out there, and people were starting to listen. As the applause began to die down, a voice from the back of the room interrupted. "This is all lies." It was Mike's voice, unmistakable, dripping with venom. "She's just trying to ruin me. She's the one with the agenda." But as he spoke, his words seemed weaker, less certain. The cracks in his story were showing. The more he shouted, the more the audience started to turn on him. "You think you can just sweep this under the rug, Mike?" Marissa asked, her voice firm. "You think you can control the truth? You can't hide anymore." For a moment, Mike faltered, but then, with a sneer, he stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the room. He pointed at Marissa. "This is a witch hunt. You'll never win." Before he could say more, someone from the back of the room, an official, stepped forward, signaling that the authorities had arrived. The shift was palpable. Marissa had done it. The story had gone public, and now it was out of her hands. As the authorities took over, Mike's expression twisted with frustration. He realized, too late, that he had lost. The system he had worked so hard to manipulate was now turning on him. Marissa felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by another. She had done what she set out to do, but the battle wasn't over. There would be more fights to come. There would always be more work to do. But for now, for this moment, she had won. The press conference had been a turning point. Marissa had hoped for a swift resolution, a quick and decisive end to the battle that had taken so much from her. But instead, the moment the truth had been exposed, the world had split into two, one side rallying around her, and the other defending the very system that had oppressed her for so long. As the footage of the damning video continued to circulate, the media quickly picked up on it, but with mixed reactions. Some outlets were full of praise, lauding her for having the courage to take on the system. Others, however, questioned the legitimacy of the evidence, suggesting that it could have been doctored or taken out of context. The lines between right and wrong were no longer clear. and Marissa found herself in the middle of a battle she hadn't prepared for. The debate in the media was fierce. On one hand, there were those who believed she had done the right thing, calling for systemic change. On the other, people defended the accused, echoing their claims that the accusations were baseless. The fallout was widespread, but it was not just in the media that the division was felt, it was in every corner of her life. Marissa stood in front of the mirror later that day, seeing the reflection of someone who had changed. She was still the same woman, but the weight of what she had done, the choices she had made, the consequences that followed, had left an imprint on her. "Are you okay?" Linda asked, her voice gentle as she entered the room. She could tell something was off. "I don't know," Marissa replied, her voice strained. "I thought I would feel triumphant. But instead, it feels like I've lost everything. My career, my family, my peace of mind, all gone." Linda stepped closer, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You did what you had to do, and the world will remember that. But this isn't just about you anymore. It's bigger than all of us." Marissa nodded, swallowing hard. She understood the gravity of her actions now more than ever. She had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Meanwhile, the man she had once called a colleague, Mike, wasn't done. Even with the truth laid bare for all to see, he was not backing down. His connections in high places had kept him afloat, and he was using every ounce of influence he had left to shift the narrative, to find a way to escape the consequences of his actions. No amount of evidence or public opinion seemed to matter to him. He had too much power, too much to lose. A week after the conference, Marissa received a call that confirmed her worst fear. Mike had found a loophole. Using his contacts in the government, he had managed to delay the investigations, to quiet the voices of those who stood against him. His legal team was ready to fight every charge, to discredit every claim, and Marissa knew she wasn't out of the woods yet. But it wasn't just him who was causing trouble. A small but vocal group of supporters, convinced that Mike had been the victim of a smear campaign, began to speak out. They marched through the streets, calling for justice for him, declaring that he had been wronged, that the video was a fabrication. Marissa had hoped that people would rally around the truth, but instead, they were becoming more divided. It was overwhelming. The sheer weight of the opposition, the hatred and the doubt, seemed to press down on her like a suffocating blanket. But despite everything, she couldn't back down. Not now. One evening, as she walked through the streets of the city, trying to clear her mind, she was stopped by an old acquaintance, a reporter who had covered some of the initial fallout. "I've been following your story, Marissa," he said quietly, "and I think the next step is clear. You can't stop here. You've got them on the ropes. But if you walk away now, they'll just rebuild the system. They'll silence the next person who speaks out." His words echoed in her mind long after the conversation ended. As she stood on the street corner, looking up at the city lights flickering in the distance, she knew he was right. She had started something, and now there was no going back. The choice was before her. Would she continue to fight, even if it meant risking everything she had left? Or would she walk away, leaving the battle for someone else to fight? Her heart ached with uncertainty. But as the light from a passing car illuminated her face, she made a decision. She couldn't stop now. The system that had caused so much pain, so much destruction, had to be taken down. She wasn't done yet. The fallout from the truth had been intense. But in many ways, the consequences were just beginning. Marissa had thought that once the truth was revealed, justice would follow. But now, as the legal and social ramifications of her actions rippled through the system, the truth seemed to be just the start of a much larger, more complex struggle. On one hand, Mike was starting to feel the pressure. Legal action was being taken against him, and his carefully built empire of influence was starting to crack. But true to form, he wasn't going down without a fight. Instead of facing the charges head-on, he used his power to negotiate, to delay, and to make promises of reform in exchange for leniency. Public apologies, weak though they were, came pouring out, but they felt hollow, empty words designed only to preserve his reputation, not to make amends. "Look at him," Marissa muttered to herself as she watched Mike from across the room during one of his many public appearances. "He's sorry that he got caught. The sense of justice that she had felt when the truth was exposed began to fade as she witnessed the lengths he was willing to go to in order to escape real consequences. The wheels of power turned slowly, but they turned nonetheless, and with every apology Mike issued, with every backroom deal he made, the harder it became to believe that true change was possible. And yet, the real toll of Marissa's battle was only beginning to settle in on her own life. She had won the fight. Yes, she had exposed the corruption that had been silently wrecking lives for years. But now, as she walked down the streets of the city that once felt familiar, she could feel the weight of her victory. Her career was in tatters, her relationships strained, and even her health had taken a hit. The cost of truth had been higher than she had ever anticipated. A phone call interrupted her thoughts, and she answered, expecting another media inquiry, but it was different this time. A familiar voice greeted her on the other end of the line. "Marissa, it's Sarah, we need to talk." Marissa's heart skipped a beat. Sarah had been one of her closest allies throughout the entire ordeal. Someone she had trusted implicitly. But in the last few weeks, Sarah had become increasingly distant, pulling away from their conversations, avoiding eye contact, and even going so far as to decline meeting in person. "What is it?" Marissa asked, trying to keep the tremble in her voice at bay. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah continued, her voice heavy with something Marissa couldn't quite place. Something that could change everything. A cold shiver ran down Marissa's spine. She had expected resistance, but she hadn't expected a secret. "What is it, Sarah?" "I can't say too much right now. But someone close to Mike, someone you never suspected, has been feeding him information. Information about you." Marissa felt her breath catch in her throat. "Who?" she asked, her pulse quickening. "I can't tell you that yet. But I will soon. Just know this, he's not as alone as you think." Before Marissa could respond, Sarah hung up, leaving her with 1,000 questions and a sinking feeling in her chest. The story was far from over. As the days passed, Marissa found herself alone with her thoughts, replaying every moment, every interaction. The victory that had once seemed so clear now felt like an illusion. She had exposed the truth. But what was the price? She couldn't help but wonder if she had truly won, or if she had merely stirred the hornet's nest, creating more problems than she had ever imagined. But even in the quiet moments of doubt, she knew one thing. She could not stop now. The phone call had revealed the cracks in the system, and even though she could no longer trust everyone she once had, she had to press on. The fight for justice was still far from over. Her next move would be more dangerous than any of the others. But it was the only choice she had left. As Marissa sat in the quiet of her apartment, the sounds of the city outside felt distant, like the echo of a life she once knew. She had fought tooth and nail to expose the corruption that had run deep within the system. And now, months later, it seemed as though the dust had finally settled. The legal battles were over, and the court of public opinion had handed her the victory. But despite the sense of relief that washed over her, there was something deep inside her that told her this wasn't the end. She looked at the framed photos on her desk, reminders of everything she had sacrificed, her career, her family, the relationships that had frayed or disappeared. The weight of it all had settled into her bones, and there were days when she wondered if it was worth it. She had made her mark, but at what cost? She could still feel the sting of the loneliness that had settled in around her. The emptiness that came with knowing how much she had lost. But she also knew this. She couldn't go back. She couldn't forget the faces of the people she had helped, or the justice that had been served to those who had suffered in silence for far too long. A sudden ding broke her reverie. A new email. She hesitated for a moment before clicking it open. The subject line was simple but jarring. A new case. The message inside was brief, but it packed a punch. "Marissa, there's another situation. It's happening in the South. Corruption, cover-ups, just like before. We need someone who's been through this, someone who knows how to fight back. Are you in?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She hadn't expected this. Not so soon. After everything. After the sacrifice. After the exhaustion. The thought of plunging back into another battle was daunting. She had told herself that once the fight was over, she would try to find peace. She had promised herself that she would move on, find stability, and rebuild her life. But as she sat there, Reading the words again, something stirred within her. The same fire that had fueled her through the darkest moments was still there. It was still burning, faintly but steadily, like a spark waiting to catch. The system she had torn apart was not an isolated incident. The same injustices, the same corrupt forces, were at work in other places, oppressing the vulnerable, manipulating the truth. Could she walk away knowing this was still happening? Could she really leave the fight when she knew there were others who would suffer the same way she had? Her hand trembled as she set the phone down, the weight of the decision settling over her like a thick fog. What was the right choice? Could she sacrifice more of herself for a cause that had already cost her so much? She stood up and paced the room, her mind racing. She had always believed that one person could make a difference, that even a single voice could start a ripple. A movement that could eventually lead to real change. But now she wasn't so sure. Could she keep fighting without losing everything else? Or had she already lost so much that it no longer mattered? The city lights outside twinkled like 1,000 possibilities. 1,000 choices that lay before her. She could walk away, build a new life, leave the past behind, but deep down, she knew that if she did, she would never feel whole again. She looked out the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The city, the world, everything seemed so distant and out of reach. And yet, in the silence of that moment, one thing became clear. The fight wasn't over. The system hadn't changed yet. Not completely. And as long as there was injustice, she knew she couldn't stop. The choice wasn't easy, but it was clear. She could walk away and try to find peace. Or she could rise up again, just as she had before, and keep fighting. But what would it take this time? Could one person really change everything? As Marissa walked away from the window, she knew the answer. She wasn't done yet. As we wrap up this story, one thing is clear. Sometimes the truth can be far more complicated than it first appears. Karoline's response to the shocking accusation shows us that standing up for what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds, can change the course of the narrative. But it also raises an important question. How far are we willing to go to protect our integrity? What would you do in her place? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Shadow Secrets for more stories that challenge the status quo and make us think. Stay tuned for our next chapter.